Before we begin this deep and emotional journey, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful documentary like this one. Now, let's begin. For years, the name Criss Angel felt unavoidable. He wasn't just a magician on television, he was a cultural moment. You saw him levitating above Las Vegas streets, escaping death-defying traps, and performing illusions so extreme they made audiences question reality itself. With dark eyeliner, leather outfits, and a rock star presence, he looked less like a traditional illusionist and more like someone who had stepped out of another dimension. But while millions watched in amazement, very few understood the cost of that spectacle. Behind the confidence, behind the danger, behind the fame, was a man being slowly crushed by pressure, grief, and pain that no illusion could erase. As his fame exploded worldwide, his personal life quietly began to fracture. Injuries piled up, expectations grew heavier, and the emotional weight of his past never loosened its grip. And when Criss Angel finally stepped away from the constant spotlight, many assumed the magic had simply faded. The truth is far more human. He didn't disappear for dramatic effect. He disappeared because life left him no other choice. Long before the world debated whether his miracles were real or the result of clever camera tricks, Criss Angel was simply Christopher Nicholas Sarantakos, a quiet, focused child growing up in East Meadow, New York. He wasn't loud or rebellious. He was curious, observant, and deeply imaginative. At just 6 years old, his life changed forever when his Aunt Stella showed him a simple card trick. To most people, it would have been a passing novelty. To Christopher, it felt like discovering a hidden language of the universe. That small moment opened a door he would never close again. By the age of 7, he was spending endless hours alone in his bedroom, rewinding VHS tapes of magic performances, practicing sleight of hand until his fingers ached. School never captured his attention the way magic did. While other kids dreamed of ordinary futures, Christopher dreamed of impossible ones. He didn't see magic as entertainment. He saw it as purpose. As he grew older, he took every chance to perform. Birthday parties, restaurants, nightclubs, anywhere someone would stop and watch. He earned little money, but each performance strengthened his belief that this was what he was meant to do. Yet just as his confidence began to grow, life delivered a devastating blow that would shape everything he became. Criss Angel's greatest supporter was always his father, John Sarantakos, a hardworking man who ran a donut shop and believed fiercely in his son's dream, even when others doubted it. That support became everything to Criss, which is why the diagnosis in the mid-1990s felt unbearable. John was diagnosed with stomach cancer and was given only weeks to live. Those weeks stretched into 3 painful years, and Criss refused to leave his father's side. He watched the strongest man he knew slowly weaken, day by day, while learning lessons about mortality no young man is ever prepared to face. In 1998, John died in Criss's arms, a moment that shattered him in ways words can barely capture. That loss hardened something inside him while igniting something else entirely. Criss became convinced that fear was the real enemy, that pain could be transformed into fuel, and that the human mind could push past limits most people never dare to approach. His magic began to change after that moment. It became darker, more dangerous, more physical. He wasn't just trying to impress audiences anymore. He was sending a message to his father wherever he might be. Every risk said, "I'm still fighting." Every escape said, "I'm still here." That grief became the engine behind everything that followed. After his father's death, Criss Angel began pushing his body and mind to extremes that went far beyond traditional illusion. His performances grew more intense, more dangerous, and more punishing. He hung from helicopters with hooks pierced through his skin, escaped from underwater coffins while holding his breath to the edge of unconsciousness, and subjected himself to physical pain that bordered on self-destruction. To outsiders, it looked like pure spectacle. To Criss, it was deeply personal. Each stunt was an act of defiance against fear, grief, and helplessness. It was also a tribute. He wasn't chasing shock value for attention, he was chasing meaning. By the early 2000s, the cultural moment aligned perfectly with his aesthetic. Goth imagery, reality television, and extreme entertainment dominated pop culture. Criss Angel didn't just fit into that world, he embodied it. When A&E launched Criss Angel, Mindfreak in 2005, It felt like lightning striking at exactly the right moment. Almost overnight, he transformed from a struggling performer into a global phenomenon. His image was everywhere, his stunts replayed endlessly, and his name became synonymous with danger and mystery. But while the world celebrated his rise, the foundations of his eventual collapse were already quietly forming. When Mindfreak premiered in July 2005, it didn't just succeed, it exploded. The show redefined what magic on television could look like. Criss Angel wasn't performing in controlled theater settings. He was walking on water, levitating between buildings, escaping restraints in public spaces, and pushing illusions into the realm of the unbelievable. To millions of viewers, he didn't feel like a magician at all. He felt supernatural. Dark visuals, aggressive music, and raw energy perfectly captured the era's appetite for edgy entertainment. But behind the scenes, the toll was severe. Chris's body absorbed constant punishment, fractures, concussions, deep cuts, and chronic pain that viewers never saw. Production schedules were relentless, and every new episode demanded something bigger and more dangerous than the last. Rest wasn't an option. Failure wasn't acceptable. The pressure to constantly escalate became suffocating. Critics accused him of recklessness, and fellow magicians dismissed him as a showman obsessed with shock. What few understood was that Mindfreak wasn't just a TV show to Criss. It was an extension of his grief, his ambition, and his need to prove that limitations could be conquered. But even the strongest illusionist has limits, and by the late 2000s, those limits were closing in fast. After 6 intense seasons and nearly 100 episodes, Criss Angel made a decision that surprised many. In 2010, he ended Mindfreak himself. There was no scandal, no dramatic network dispute, no public meltdown. He simply couldn't keep sacrificing his body and mind at that pace. Years of constant pressure had caught up with him. His injuries were accumulating, his mental exhaustion was overwhelming. And the emotional weight he carried had never truly been addressed. Ending the show wasn't a defeat, it was an act of survival. Criss hoped that stepping away would allow him to rest, heal, and rediscover his creativity. But instead of peace, he walked into one of the most uncertain periods of his life. The world moved quickly, and television trends changed even faster. The fame that once felt permanent suddenly seemed fragile. Without Mindfreak, Criss Angel was forced to confront a terrifying question. Who was he without the constant spectacle? That uncertainty haunted him as he attempted to reinvent himself in an industry that rarely waits for anyone. The illusion of invincibility he had built for years began to crack, revealing a man exhausted, wounded, and searching for direction. In 2013, Criss Angel attempted to return to television with a new series called Criss Angel Believe. This time, the format was different. It focused more on behind-the-scenes creation rather than high-risk stunts. While the concept was more personal and reflective, it failed to capture the same audience that Mindfreak once commanded. Viewers missed the danger. Critics felt the intensity was gone. After only 10 episodes, the show was quietly canceled. That moment marked the beginning of Criss Angel's gradual retreat from mainstream television. Offers slowed. Networks chased younger stars and viral trends. Nearly a decade later, he tried once more with Magic with the Stars on the CW in 2022. The premise was simple, celebrities learning illusions under his guidance. But the timing was brutal. Ratings across television were collapsing, and the show struggled to find an audience. After one season, it was canceled. To the public, it looked like Criss Angel had vanished. No viral stunts, no constant media presence, but the truth was more complicated. He wasn't giving up. He was fighting relevance in an industry that had changed, while carrying personal burdens no audience could see. Even as television opportunities faded, Criss Angel refused to abandon the stage. Las Vegas had become his creative home, and he fought to maintain a presence there. His 2008 collaboration with Cirque du Soleil, Believe, struggled initially and faced harsh criticism. Instead of walking away, Criss reclaimed creative control, reshaping the show into Mindfreak Live, which finally earned respect. But the victories were short-lived. By 2018, the show closed, leaving him without a permanent Vegas stage for the first time in years. In 2017, during a routine straitjacket escape performed upside down, something went horribly wrong. Mid-performance, Criss lost consciousness. The audience fell silent as the curtain dropped. He later woke up in a hospital with no memory of what had happened. His body had finally reached its breaking point. The man known for escaping death had come terrifyingly close to it. This incident was a warning, one he could no longer ignore. His body was aging. The pain was real, and the cost of pushing further was becoming too high. As Criss Angel continued performing, smaller controversies added new pressure. In 2023, an altercation involving an audience member and security briefly placed him in negative headlines. While the situation was resolved, it added another layer of scrutiny to a career already under stress. To the public, Criss now appeared older, injured, and less invincible. Online speculation flourished. Some believed he had burned out. Others whispered about scandals or secret collapses. The truth remained hidden behind rumor and assumption. What few understood was that Criss wasn't fighting the world anymore. He was fighting time, pain, and responsibility. The persona that once thrived on rebellion was slowly giving way to something quieter, something more grounded. But nothing prepared him for the battle that would ultimately change everything and explain why he truly stepped away. In 2015, Criss Angel faced the most devastating moment of his life. His young son, Johnny Christopher, was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at just 20 months old. In that instant, magic lost all meaning. There was no illusion to escape this reality, no stunt to outsmart fate. Fame, ratings, and applause became irrelevant. Criss disappeared from public life not for reinvention, but for survival. His world became hospital rooms, chemotherapy treatments, and sleepless nights filled with fear. He watched his child endure pain no parent should ever witness. Remissions came, followed by relapses. Years passed in a cycle of hope and heartbreak. Criss slept on hospital floors, prayed through the sound of monitors, and learned what true helplessness felt like. The man who once pierced his skin for entertainment was now terrified of watching an IV needle touch his child's arm. This was the real reason he vanished. Instead of surrendering to despair, Criss Angel transformed his pain into purpose. He founded the Heal Foundation, dedicated to funding pediatric cancer research, an area he discovered was severely underfunded. He turned his shows into fundraisers and used his platform to amplify the voices of families facing the same nightmare. His magic became symbolic rather than shocking. It was no longer about defying death, but about honoring life. Audiences saw a different Criss Angel, not a rock star illusionist, but a father fighting alongside his child. Every performance carried meaning beyond entertainment. He wasn't performing to impress the world anymore. He was performing to survive it. When Criss returned full-time to Las Vegas in 2019, he was a changed man. The dark aesthetic remained, but the fire behind it had evolved. He performed consistently, quietly, without chasing headlines. Fame was no longer the goal. Stability was, family was, purpose was. While tourists filled his theater, the wider world barely noticed he was still working. To many, he had faded away. But in reality, he had simply stepped into a different role. As his visibility declined, rumors grew. Online forums speculated endlessly. Some accused him of occult symbolism. Others invented conspiracies to explain his absence. Criss dismissed them all. "It's just illusion," he said repeatedly. But the internet prefers mystery over truth. Meanwhile, he kept his personal life guarded, prioritizing his children and wife over public narratives. With 3 children and years of medical trauma behind him, Criss Angel's priorities were clear. He chose fatherhood over fame, healing over headlines, presence over applause. The world may remember him as the man who walked on water, but those closest to him know him as the man who never left his child's side. That choice changed everything. Criss Angel didn't vanish because the magic faded. He stepped away because life demanded more than illusion. His story isn't one of failure, but of sacrifice, of choosing love over legacy. Whether he ever returns to television remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The greatest escape Criss Angel ever performed wasn't from chains or coffins. It was from the illusion that fame mattered more than family. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.